door! Stop resisting right now!
My hands are visible. The car is in park. I am not resisting.
Step out of the vehicle! That's a lawful order!
Then state the crime, officer. Because right now, you're escalating nothing. Your camera is on. Take a breath. This ends badly if you don't.
The scream shattered the morning calm of the drive-through line. It wasn't the voice of authority. It was the voice of panic, of a man losing control before he had even begun. Officer Kyle Miller, 28 years old and flushed with an aggression that far outstripped his experience, had his hand hovering dangerously close to his holster. His other hand was slamming against the pristine charcoal gray door of the Ford F-150. Open the door. Stop resisting. Inside the cab, the scene was entirely different. There was no panic. There was no flailing. Marcus Thorne sat behind the wheel with the stillness of a statue. His large, calloused hands were placed clearly at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide to show they were empty. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't reaching for the glove box. He was looking directly at Officer Miller through the driver's side window, his expression unreadable behind a pair of wire-rimmed aviator sunglasses. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that carried easily through the glass. "I am not resisting. My vehicle is in park. My hands are visible. You are screaming at a citizen who is waiting for a cup of coffee." "I don't care what you're waiting for," Miller yelled, playing to an audience he hadn't realized was already judging him. "I gave you a lawful order, step out of the vehicle. And I am asking for the lawful basis of that order," Marcus replied, his pulse not rising a single beat. He had been shot at in the Panjshir Valley. He had negotiated logistics convoys through the heated streets of Fallujah. A 20-something municipal cop with a bad haircut and an attitude problem was not going to make him flinch. "You have approached me with your weapon ready. You are escalating a situation where no crime has been committed. The camera on your chest is recording and the cameras on this building are recording. Take a breath, son. You're making a mistake." Miller didn't hear the advice. He only heard defiance. In his mind, the man in the truck, a broad-shouldered black man in a nondescript polo shirt, was a threat to his authority. Miller had been on the force for 4 years, long enough to get arrogant, but not long enough to get wise. He yanked the door handle. It was locked. "Unlock it now, or I'm breaking the glass." Marcus sighed a heavy exhale through his nose. He didn't move his hands from the wheel. He knew exactly what this was. He had seen green privates panic in the field like this, but this wasn't a war zone. It was a Tuesday morning in a suburb that prided itself on manicured lawns and quiet streets. Marcus slowly lifted one finger, pointing to the lock button. "I am going to unlock the door with my left hand." Marcus broadcasted clearly, his voice steady. "I am doing this under duress and in fear for my safety due to your aggressive behavior." "Just do it!" Miller shrieked. Marcus clicked the unlock button. The sound was a sharp thud in the tense air. Miller ripped the door open, the smell of fresh leather and stale coffee escaping the cab. But before he could grab the driver, Marcus turned his head slowly. "Officer," Marcus said, looking over the rim of his glasses, "before you put your hands on me, you need to understand something. I spent 25 years in the United States Army. I was a ranger when you were in diapers. I respect the uniform. I respect the badge. But you are about to cross a line that you cannot uncross. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Miller hesitated. For a fraction of a second, the steel in Marcus's voice cut through the adrenaline. But the drive-through line was watching. The barista in the window was watching. Miller's ego took the wheel. "Get out!" Miller lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the left arm. To understand how a simple coffee run turned into a constitutional crisis, you have to understand the 20 minutes prior. Marcus Thorne was not a man who hurried. At 55 years old, he moved with the deliberate economy of a man who had spent a lifetime correcting the mistakes of others. He was retired, technically, but men like Marcus never truly retired. He ran a high-level logistics consultancy firm, now advising the Department of Defense on supply chain security. He made a very comfortable living, evidenced by the $80,000 truck he kept spotless, but he didn't flaunt it. He dressed in plain clothes, kept his hair high and tight, and expected things to work the way they were supposed to. That Tuesday was supposed to be a paperwork day. He had left his home, a modest ranch-style house in a good neighborhood that he had paid off a decade ago, and headed to his favorite local coffee spot. It was a daily ritual. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. He had pulled into the drive-thru lane behind a minivan loaded with kids. The line was slow. Marcus didn't mind. He put the truck in park and picked up his phone to check his emails. A shipment of medical supplies was delayed in Germany, and he needed to approve a reroute. He tapped out a quick response, set the phone down, and waited. That was the suspicious activity. Officer Kyle Miller had been parked across the street eating a breakfast sandwich and scrolling through social media in his cruiser. He looked up and saw a black Mercedes truck, no a Ford, but a nice one, sitting in the line. He saw a black male driver looking down at his lap. In Miller's bored and biased calculation, this didn't look like a local resident getting coffee. It looked like a drug deal waiting to happen, or maybe a lookout. It was a feeling, the kind of hunch that bad cops confuse for instinct. Miller had pulled his cruiser into the lot, coming in hot, cutting off the exit lane. He parked and walked up to the truck on foot, approaching from the blind spot. He hadn't run the plates. If he had, he would have seen the vehicle was registered to Marcus Thorne with a clean record and a concealed carry permit that was flagged for law enforcement awareness, not because he was dangerous, but because he was highly trained. But Miller didn't run the tags. He just walked up and saw Marcus sitting there staring forward again, waiting for the minivan to move. "Hey!" Miller had barked, slapping the rear quarter panel of the truck. Marcus had watched him in the side mirror, confused. He rolled down the window halfway. "Can I help you, officer?" "What are you doing here?" Miller asked, hand resting on his belt. "I'm buying coffee," Marcus said, gesturing to the menu board. "Is there a problem?" "You've been sitting here for 5 minutes." "It's a drive-through line, son. It moves when it moves." That was the trigger. Son. It wasn't meant as an insult. It was the way Marcus spoke to anyone younger than 40. But Miller took it as a challenge. The dynamic was set instantly, a young man demanding submission, and an older man who had earned his dignity and wasn't about to hand it over for free. "Step out of the car," Miller had ordered, bypassing the request for license and registration entirely. "No," Marcus had said simply, and that was when the screaming started. "I'm going to ask you again," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm as Miller grabbed his arm. "What is the articulable, reasonable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime, Terry versus Ohio? You need more than a hunch, officer." Miller yanked on Marcus's arm, but Marcus was 220 pounds of solid muscle. He didn't budge. It was like trying to pull a tree stump out of the ground. "I smell marijuana," Miller shouted. The lie hung in the air, thick and rancid. It was the oldest trick in the book, a desperate fabrication to manufacture probable cause where none existed. Marcus actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Marijuana, son, I haven't touched a drug in my life. I hold a top-secret security clearance with the Department of Defense. I am subject to random drug screenings every 30 days. If you are going to lie, you should pick something plausible. You are now on record fabricating evidence." "I smell what I smell." Miller doubled down his face, turning a blotchy red. "And you are obstructing an investigation. Get out." "Refusing an unlawful order is not obstruction," Marcus stated, reciting the law as if he were reading a field manual. "You have not asked for my license. You have not asked for my registration. You jumped straight to a seizure of my person. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights, and you are doing it in broad daylight." By now, the woman in the minivan ahead had stepped out of her car. She was holding her phone up horizontal, steady. 2 people walking their dogs on the sidewalk had stopped and were recording as well, The barista was leaning out the window, phone in hand. "Look at them," Marcus said, nodding his head toward the witnesses. "They are documenting this. Every lie you tell, every policy you violate, it's all being saved. You have a chance to walk this back right now. Ask for my ID, run my name, apologize, and we can all go about our day. But if you pull me out of this truck, you are ending your career." Miller looked around. He saw the phones. He saw the judgment in the eyes of the soccer mom. He felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. But like a gambler who had lost too much to quit, he felt he had to go all in. If he backed down now, he was weak. If he arrested the guy, he could figure out the charges later. Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, failure to obey, he could stick something on him. "I'm done asking," Miller shouted. He unholstered his taser, the yellow plastic gleaming in the sun. "Get out or you're gonna ride the lightning." Marcus looked at the taser, then back at Miller's eyes. He saw the fear there. A fearful man with a weapon was the most dangerous thing on earth. "I am exiting the vehicle," Marcus announced loudly for the cameras. "I am complying to avoid physical injury. I am not consenting to this search or seizure." He unbuckled his seatbelt with slow, deliberate movements. He opened the door the rest of the way and stepped out. He towered over Miller. Marcus stood 6'2", his posture perfect, his clothes immaculate. Miller, slouching in his tactical vest, looked like a child wearing a costume. As soon as Marcus's boots hit the pavement, Miller spun him around. "Hands on the truck. Now!" Marcus placed his hands on the warm metal of his truck. He spread his feet. He didn't flinch as Miller roughly kicked his ankles apart wider than necessary. "You're making a big mistake, officer," the woman from the minivan called out. "He wasn't doing anything. We've been in this line for 10 minutes. "Back up, ma'am," Miller yelled over his shoulder, his voice cracking. "Do not interfere with police business." Miller holstered his taser and grabbed his handcuffs. He wrenched Marcus's left arm behind his back, cranking the shoulder joint upward in a pain compliance hold that was completely unnecessary for a compliant subject. Marcus didn't make a sound. He had broken bones before. He had taken shrapnel. A twisted shoulder from a mall cop was nothing. He focused on his breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Click. The first cuff went on. Click. The second. "You are under arrest." Miller panted, the adrenaline making his hands shake. "For what?" Marcus asked, his face pressed against the side of his own truck. "State the charge." "Disorderly conduct and resisting arrest." "I can't be arrested for resisting arrest if there was no underlying crime to arrest me for," Marcus said calmly. "You're stacking charges to cover your incompetence. Reach into my back left pocket. My wallet is there. Take it out." "I'll search you when we get to the station," Miller snapped. He patted Marcus down roughly, checking for weapons. He found the concealed carry permit in the wallet but didn't look at it closely, just shoved the wallet into his own pocket. He felt the holster on Marcus's right hip. "Gun!" Miller yelled, jumping back. "I have a permit," Marcus said tiredly. "It is in the wallet you just confiscated. It is legal. I am a licensed carrier. If you had run my plates, you would know that. If you had asked for ID, you would know that." Miller ripped the firearm, a compact Sig Sauer, from Marcus's hip and placed it on the hood of the cruiser. He looked at the crowd, trying to look heroic, as if he had just disarmed a terrorist. "He's got a gun," Miller said to the crowd, justifying himself. "It's a legal carry," the lady with the phone shouted back. "This is Texas. Half of us have guns. You didn't even ask him for a permit." Miller grabbed Marcus by the arm and marched him toward the cruiser. Marcus walked with dignity, head up. He looked directly into the lens of the woman's phone as he passed. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said clearly to the camera. "I am a retired Master Sergeant, United States Army. I am being arrested without cause. Please keep recording." He was shoved into the back of the patrol car. The plastic seat was hard, the cage cramped. Miller slammed the door, shutting out the protests of the crowd. Miller got into the front seat. He was breathing hard, sweating. He stared at his hands on the steering wheel. He felt a flicker of doubt, a cold knot in his stomach. The guy hadn't fought. The guy had known the law better than he did. And that voice, that command presence, it wasn't the voice of a criminal. But it was too late. He started the engine. The ride to the precinct was short and silent. Miller tried to put on some music, trying to normalize the situation, but the silence from the back seat was suffocating. Marcus didn't ask for water. He didn't ask to be let go. He just sat there staring at the back of Miller's head, his eyes burning a hole through the cage. They arrived at the station. Miller pulled Marcus out of the car and walked him into the processing area. The precinct was busy, phones ringing, officers typing reports, the hum of fluorescent lights. At the booking desk sat Sergeant Kowalski. Kowalski was 58, a Vietnam vet who had transitioned to police work in the late 70s. He had seen everything. He was counting down the days to his pension, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee and a bad back. He looked up as Miller dragged Marcus in. Kowalski's eyes narrowed. He took in the scene instantly. Miller flushed and defensive. Marcus handcuffed but standing at parade rest, calm, well-dressed, radiating a quiet fury. "What do we have here, Miller?" Kowalski asked, his voice gravelly. "Disorderly conduct resisting failure to obey," Miller recited, tossing Marcus's wallet and keys onto the counter. "And I recovered a firearm. He claims he has a permit." Kowalski looked at Marcus. He looked at the cut of Marcus's jaw, the way he held himself. Game recognizes game. "Sir?" Kowalski said to Marcus, nodding respectfully. "I'll need to remove these cuffs to print you, but first let's see who we're talking to." Kowalski picked up the leather wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the driver's license. Marcus Aurelius Thorne. The second thing he saw was the concealed handgun license. Valid. The third thing he saw made Kowalski pause. It was a blue retiree ID card from the Department of Defense. U.S. Army, rank MSG Master Sergeant. But it was the fourth card tucked behind the military ID that made the blood drain from Kowalski's face. It was a white card with a gold chip and a holographic strip. A CAC card with a red band across the top. Level 5 security clearance. Department of Defense Logistics Agency. Contractor access Pentagon/restricted. Kowalski looked at the card. He looked at Miller. Then he looked at Marcus. "Miller." Kowalski said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "Did you read this man his rights?" I was going to do it here," Miller stammered. "Did you verify his permit?" The system was down in the car." "Did you find any drugs?" "I smelled weed. Strong odor of marijuana." Kowalski leaned over the counter and sniffed. He smelled expensive cologne starch and old leather. He didn't smell a hint of smoke. He looked at Marcus's eyes, clear, sharp, sober. "Master Sergeant," Kowalski said, addressing Marcus directly. "I apologize for the wait." "It's quite all right, Sergeant," Marcus replied. "Your officer here seems to believe I am a drug trafficker. He also seems to believe that smelling a phantom odor gives him the right to violate Terry and the Fourth Amendment." Kowalski closed the wallet slowly. He looked at Miller with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Miller," Kowalski said, "go get Lieutenant Graves, now." "But Sarge, I need to process." "I said now." Kowalski roared, slamming his hand on the desk. The entire booking room went silent. "Get the lieutenant, and don't you dare touch that paperwork." Lieutenant Graves was a pragmatic man. He was trying to keep a department running in a time of budget cuts and public scrutiny. When he walked into the booking area and saw Sergeant Kowalski standing next to an uncuffed Marcus Thorne offering him a bottle of water, he knew his day was ruined. Kowalski handed Graves the stack of ID cards. Graves shuffled through them. He stopped at the contractor badge. He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," Graves said, keeping his voice level. I'm Lieutenant Graves. I understand there's been an incident. An incident implies an accident, Lieutenant, Marcus said, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had left red marks. This was an assault. It was a deprivation of rights under color of law. 18 U.S. Code Section 242. Your officer kidnapped me from a drive-thru line because he didn't like the way I looked. Graves sighed. He glared at Miller, who was standing in the corner looking small. Officer Miller says he smelled marijuana, Graves said, testing the waters. I am happy to submit to a urinalysis right now, Marcus countered immediately. In fact, I insist on it. And when it comes back clean, I want that added to the file. But more importantly, I want the body camera footage secured. I want the dash cam footage secured, and I want the name of the watch commander. Graves realized the weed excuse was dead. He switched tactics. Look, Mr. Thorne, it sounds like things got heated. Miller is young. He's overzealous. We can drop all the charges right now. You walk out of here, take your truck, we wipe the arrest record. No harm, no foul. We'll handle Miller internally. It was the standard offer. The pie-go-away deal. Marcus stood up slowly. He adjusted his polo shirt. Lieutenant, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It is not. I have been publicly humiliated. I have been manhandled. My reputation has been attacked. If I walk out of here without a formal complaint filed, without a paper trail, you will bury this. You will give him a reprimand and put him back on the street. And next week he'll do this to some kid who doesn't have a ranger tab and a legal team. Marcus leaned in close. I fought for this country for 25 years. I didn't do it so a punk with a badge could treat citizens like enemy combatants. I am filing a formal complaint. I am retaining counsel. And I am going to sue this department for every dime it has. Mr. Thorne, be reasonable. Graves warned, his tone hardening. The court battle will take years. It's expensive. I have time, Marcus said, a cold smile touching his lips. And fortunately, Lieutenant, I have a hell of a lot of money. The lawsuit hit the desk of the city attorney 3 days later. It was not a polite letter. It was a sledgehammer. Thorne versus the city. Thorne versus Officer Kyle Miller. But the real damage wasn't done in the courtroom. It was done on the internet. The woman in the minivan had posted her video on TikTok. She titled it, Cop Attacks Quiet Veteran for Buying Coffee. The algorithm did the rest. Within 24 hours, the video had 4 million views. It was impossible to look away. The contrast was too stark, the screaming frantic officer and the calm, stoic black man standing like a statue against his truck. The dialogue was crystal clear. What is the articulable, reasonable suspicion? I smell marijuana. The internet sleuths went to work. They found Marcus's LinkedIn profile. They saw the awards, the service record, the logistics company. They realized the weed excuse was laughable. Then they found Miller. A freelance journalist in the city dug into public records. She found 3 previous complaints against Officer Miller. All of them involved older minority men. One was a grandfather stopped for walking in the roadway while getting his mail. Another was a retired postal worker detained for loitering at a bus stop. In all cases, Miller had claimed they were belligerent, and in all cases, the department had dismissed the complaints as unfounded. But with the video of Marcus Thorne, the pattern was undeniable. The blue wall of silence that had protected Miller cracked. The police chief, facing a PR nightmare, tried to hold a press conference to contextualize the event. It was a disaster. Reporters shouted questions about why a highly cleared defense contractor was accused of smoking weed at 9 a.m. Marcus's lawyer, a shark named Eleanor Vance, who specialized in civil rights litigation, went on national news. This isn't just about my client, Vance said, sitting next to a silent, dignified Marcus. This is about a culture that allows an officer to view a citizen as a subject. Officer Miller saw a black man in a nice truck and decided he didn't belong there. He fabricated a crime to justify his bias. We are going to prove it. Discovery was brutal. The Bodycam footage, which the department tried to delay releasing, was eventually leaked. It showed Miller turning off his audio for 30 seconds after the arrest, a violation of policy that looked incredibly suspicious. It showed him laughing with another officer, later bragging about taking down the big guy. The city manager watched the footage and called the mayor. "Settle it," the manager said. "Write the check. If this goes to a jury, they will give him the keys to the city." 8 months later, the settlement was finalized. The city agreed to pay Marcus Thorne $850,000. It was a staggering sum for a wrongful arrest case involving no major physical injuries, but the punitive potential was too high to risk a trial. As part of the settlement, Marcus insisted on a non-monetary clause, the release of the full internal affairs investigation into Kyle Miller. The report was damning. It showed a chaotic, undisciplined officer who had been flagged by his training sergeant at the academy for aggression issues, but passed anyway because the department was short-staffed. Kyle Miller was fired, not allowed to resign fired. The Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission decertified him. His law enforcement career was over. He couldn't get a job as a mall cop. The internet never forgets. Every time an employer Googled his name, the video of him screaming at Marcus popped up. Marcus took the check. He didn't buy a boat. He didn't upgrade his truck. He walked into the office of the Veterans Legal Defense Fund, a local nonprofit that helped vets with legal trouble, and handed them the check, every cent. "Use this," Marcus told the director, "for the ones who don't know the law, for the ones who can't stay calm. Make sure they get a fair fight." On a crisp Tuesday morning in October, nearly a year after the incident, Marcus pulled his truck into the same drive-thru. The sun was shining, the air was cool, the line was long. He put the truck in park. He picked up his phone to check his email. A patrol car rolled by on the street. The officer inside a new recruit glanced at the truck. He saw a man minding his own business. The officer kept driving. Marcus watched the cruiser disappear. He took a sip of his black coffee. It tasted better than usual. Freedom always did. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He was older, a little grayer. The fight had taken a toll, but it had been worth it. He thought about the young men coming home from service trying to find their place in a country that didn't always love them back. He thought about the power of standing your ground not with fists, but with the truth. Justice wasn't given. Marcus realized as he put the truck in gear. Justice was something you had to take hold and defend every single day. He drove out of the lot, merging into traffic, just another citizen on his way to work. How would you have reacted in Marcus's shoes? Would you have been able to stay that calm with a gun in your face? It's easy to say yes, but harder to do. If this story reminded you that rights are like muscles, you have to exercise them or you lose them, drop a yes in the comments. And please subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here that believes in truth, accountability, and the American way. See you in the next one.